In the vast tapestry of the galaxy, where civilizations rise and fall like cosmic seasons, there exists a species so seemingly fragile that their homeworld appears as nothing more than a blue marble suspended in the void. Yet beneath this deceptive tranquility lies a truth that would make even the most battle-hardened galactic empires pause in their conquest. What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? The Zephyrian Empire, conquerors of 1,000 worlds, are about to discover that some prey fight back in ways that defy all logic, all military doctrine, and all reasonable expectations of survival. This is the story of Earth's first contact with a galactic civilization, and why a seasoned diplomat would risk everything to prevent what he saw as the greatest military disaster in recorded history. Sometimes, the most dangerous enemy is the one who refuses to surrender, even when surrender is the only rational choice. The crystal spires of the Galactic Council chambers stretch toward the artificial sky of Station Prime, their surfaces reflecting the light of 17 different suns. Ambassador Thane Vex 9 stood before the massive viewing portal, his scaled hands clasped behind his back as he watched the fleet preparations in the distance. Hundreds of Zephyrian warships moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the distinctive crimson and gold of the Empire. Beautiful, aren't they? Fleet Admiral Corax entered the chamber, his multiple arms spreading in a gesture of pride. The Zephyrian's exoskeleton clicked with each step, a sound that had become synonymous with conquest across the galaxy. Thane turned slowly, his violet eyes reflecting centuries of diplomatic experience. As one of the oldest members of the Galactic Council, he had witnessed the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations. The Zephyrian Empire had been particularly efficient in their expansions over the past 200 years, adding system after system to their growing territory. They are impressive, Thane replied carefully, his voice carrying the measured tone of someone who had learned to choose words with precision. Though I wonder if such a massive deployment is truly necessary for a single primitive world. Corax's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. Earth? That little blue marble in the Sol system? Our scouts report they haven't even achieved faster than light travel. Their most advanced weapons are chemical-based projectiles and primitive nuclear devices. One battle group would be sufficient, but the Emperor wants to make a statement. The statement, Thane knew, was always the same. Submit or be destroyed. It was the Zephyrian way, and it had proven remarkably effective across their campaign of galactic expansion. Primitive worlds were given a simple choice: accept Zephyrian rule and provide resources and labor, or face complete annihilation. I've been reviewing the scout reports on this Earth, Thane said, moving to the central console where holographic displays showed detailed analysis of the target world. Their development patterns are unusual. Unusual how? Corax joined him, his forearms manipulating the controls to bring up various data streams. Population statistics, technological assessments, cultural analysis reports scrolled past in streams of light. Thane highlighted a particular section of the data. They have over 7 billion individuals on a single world. Most species achieve interstellar travel by the time their population reaches 2 billion. These humans have remained confined to their system despite having the theoretical knowledge for space travel. Primitive and overpopulated, Corax dismissed. That makes them perfect for resource extraction and labor conscription. The more bodies, the better for our purposes. But Thane was studying deeper patterns in the data. His species, the Kethani, had evolved as natural analysts and diplomats. They saw connections others missed, patterns that revealed hidden truths about civilizations. What he saw in the human data files troubled him deeply. Look at their conflict history, Thane said, expanding a timeline that showed thousands of years of human warfare. They have been in almost constant conflict with each other throughout their recorded history. Even better, Corax's enthusiasm grew. Divided civilizations fall faster. We can exploit their internal conflicts, turn their factions against each other. That's not what concerns me. Thane manipulated the display to show more recent data. Look at their conflicts in the last century alone. 2 global wars involving their entire species. The second one ended with them developing and using nuclear weapons against each other. Corax studied the data more carefully now. They used nuclear weapons against their own kind? Multiple times. And then, they built more. Thousands more. According to our scouts, they currently possess enough nuclear weapons to destroy their own world several times over. A pause filled the chamber as Corax processed this information. In all their conquests, the Zephyrians had never encountered a species that had weaponized their planet to such an extent while remaining on a single world. But they stopped using them, Corax pointed out. The weapons exist, but they haven't detonated any in decades. Thane nodded grimly. They stopped using them against each other. The key phrase there is against each other. They've spent the intervening decades perfecting delivery systems, making the weapons more powerful, more accurate, more devastating. They call it deterrence. The tactical implications began to dawn on the fleet admiral. Thane continued his analysis, bringing up more disturbing data points. Their literature, entertainment, and cultural products are filled with scenarios of alien invasion. They've imagined, planned, and prepared for exactly what we're about to do to them. Their fiction is full of stories where they fight hopeless battles against superior forces and somehow find ways to win. Fiction is not reality, Corax said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. No, but it reveals how they think. Look at their response patterns to natural disasters, terrorist attacks, and other existential threats. They don't surrender. They don't flee. They adapt, they innovate, and they fight back with whatever resources they have available. Thane highlighted a series of historical incidents. When their buildings were attacked by extremists, they didn't retreat from building tall structures. They built them taller and made them stronger. When diseases threatened their populations, they didn't accept defeat. They developed medicines and treatments that turned death sentences into manageable conditions. The data painted a picture of a species that responded to threats not with submission or retreat, but with stubborn, often irrational determination to overcome seemingly impossible odds. Admiral, Thane said quietly, I believe an invasion of Earth would be a catastrophic mistake. Corax's exoskeleton bristled. They are a pre-FTL civilization. Our technology is thousands of years ahead of theirs. Our ships can destroy entire continents from orbit. And they have enough nuclear weapons to turn their own world into an uninhabitable wasteland, Thane replied. Do you think a species that would use such weapons against each other would hesitate to use them against invaders? The viewing portal showed more ships joining the fleet formation. The Zephyrian Empire had committed significant resources to this operation. Pulling back now would be seen as weakness, something the Empire could not afford in a galaxy where strength was the only currency that mattered. You're suggesting they would destroy their own world rather than surrender? Corax asked. I'm suggesting they would make it too costly for us to hold. Look at their military doctrine. They have concepts like scorched earth and Pyrrhic victory. They have entire military strategies based on making victory so expensive for an opponent that it becomes indistinguishable from defeat. Thane brought up more cultural analysis data. They have sayings like better to die standing than to live kneeling and give me liberty or give me death. These aren't just words to them. Their history is full of examples where they chose destruction over subjugation. The chamber fell silent except for the ambient hum of the station's systems. Through the viewing portal, the fleet continued its preparations, unaware of the conversation taking place in the diplomatic quarters. Even if you're correct, Corax said finally, the Emperor has made his decision. The invasion fleet launches in 72 standard hours. Thane turned back to the data displays, studying the human profiles with growing unease. 7 billion individuals on a world that had survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, and countless wars. A species that had looked at the vastness of space and decided to explore it despite having no faster-than-light technology. A civilization that had split the atom and, then, used that power both to create energy and to build weapons of unprecedented destruction. I'm going to recommend an immediate emergency session of the Galactic Council, Thane announced. Corax's mandibles clicked in annoyance. The Council will not override an Imperial decision based on speculative cultural analysis. They might if they understand what we're potentially unleashing. Thane began compiling his report, pulling together every piece of evidence he had gathered about human nature and behavior patterns. Admiral, I've studied 17 different species that the Empire has conquered. Every single one of them had clear breaking points. levels of pressure where they would submit rather than face extinction. He paused, looking directly at the Zephyrian officer. Humans appear to have no such breaking point. When faced with extinction, their historical pattern is to drag their enemies down with them. The data streams continued flowing around them, painting an increasingly complex picture of Earth's inhabitants. Military capabilities that seemed primitive by galactic standards but were backed by an industrial capacity that had turned the entire planet into a fortress. A species that had spent centuries perfecting the art of warfare against opponents with similar technology levels, suddenly, faced with invaders whose advantages lay primarily in their advanced technology and not in their understanding of the human fighting spirit. "I need to send a priority message to the Council immediately," Thane said, moving toward the communication console. "You're overreacting," Korax insisted. "One world cannot stand against the entire Zephyrian fleet." "One world with 7 billion soldiers," Thane corrected. "Because that's what every human becomes when their home is threatened. Look at their response to the theoretical invasion scenarios in their entertainment. They don't imagine negotiating or finding diplomatic solutions. They imagine fighting house to house, street by street, making every meter cost the invaders dearly." The ambassador began his transmission to the Council Emergency Committee, knowing he had perhaps hours before the political machinery of the Empire made retreat impossible. As he composed his warnings, he couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy was about to witness something unprecedented. The Zephyrian Empire had built its expansion on the simple principle that every species had a point where survival instincts overcame pride and resistance. They had never encountered a species whose survival instincts manifested as increased aggression rather than submission. In 72 hours, unless something changed dramatically, the galaxy would discover whether Ambassador Thane Vex 9's analysis was the wisdom of an experienced diplomat or the paranoid delusions of an aging bureaucrat. The massive fleet outside the viewing portal continued its preparations, unaware that their target world represented something entirely new in galactic conquest, a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history learning how to fight wars they couldn't win, and somehow winning them anyway. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within 18 hours of Thane's request, a remarkable speed for an organization known for its bureaucratic deliberation. Representatives from 47 different species gathered in the great amphitheater of Station Prime, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, harmonic tones, and translated speech. Counselor Prima 7 of the Silicon Collective called the session to order with a resonant chime that vibrated through the crystalline chamber. As one of the founding members of the Council, the Silicon Collective held significant influence, though they rarely involved themselves in matters of biological species conquest. Ambassador Thane Vex 9 has requested emergency consideration of pending military operations in Sector 7 Alpha, Prima 7 announced. The floor recognizes the Kethani representative. Thane rose from his position, acutely aware of the skeptical attention focused on him. The Galactic Council had protocols for such situations, but they were rarely invoked to challenge Imperial expansion decisions. The political implications of what he was attempting could end his diplomatic career. "Honored counselors," Thane began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems, "I stand before you today with a warning that may sound unprecedented, but which I believe represents a critical threat to galactic stability." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The Zephyrian delegation, led by Ambassador Korax himself, remained conspicuously silent. The Zephyrian Empire's planned invasion of the Sol system, specifically the third planet known as Earth, represents what I believe will be a catastrophic miscalculation that could destabilize the entire outer spiral arm. Counselor Reefsinger of the Aquatic Dominion raised a tentacle in question. "Ambassador Thane, are you suggesting that a pre-FTL civilization poses a threat to an Imperial fleet?" "Not in the conventional sense," Thane replied, activating the central holographic display. The familiar blue marble of Earth appeared, rotating slowly as data streams flowed around it. "I'm suggesting that this particular species represents something we have never encountered in our recorded history of galactic expansion." The display shifted to show human population centers, technological infrastructure, and military installations. To most observers, it appeared to be standard intelligence gathering on a primitive world. The species known as humans have several characteristics that make them uniquely dangerous as invasion targets, Thane continued. First, their population density and technological distribution. Unlike most pre-FTL civilizations, they have not centralized their population or critical infrastructure. Their industry is distributed across multiple continents, their population centers number in the hundreds, and their military capabilities are deliberately redundant. Korax finally spoke up. Ambassador Thane is describing a typical late-stage planetary civilization. Distributed population and industry are common characteristics. But not combined with this. Thane highlighted new data. Human psychological profiles indicate they possess what their own social scientists call loss aversion to an extreme degree. They value what they have far more than they desire what they don't have. When threatened with loss of their territory, their response patterns consistently favor resistance over survival. The avian collective representative, Speaker Winson, chirped a question that was translated as, "Surely all species show some territorial defense instincts?" "Not to this degree," Thane replied. He brought up comparative psychological analysis charts. Most species, when faced with overwhelming force, will calculate survival odds and choose submission when resistance appears futile. Humans appear to calculate the cost of submission and often choose resistance even when it appears suicidal. The data showed historical examples: humans choosing to fight to the death rather than surrender in battles they couldn't win, civilian populations choosing destruction over occupation, entire nations choosing devastation over defeat. Their own military doctrine includes concepts like mutually assured destruction, Thane explained. They built weapons capable of destroying their own civilization specifically to prevent enemies from conquering them. They call it deterrence, but it reveals something profound about their psychology: they would rather cease to exist than exist under enemy control. Counselor Stonemind of the Mineral Assembly rumbled a deep question: what does this mean for practical military operations? Thane had prepared for this question. A holographic display shifted to show tactical projections based on human response patterns. Standard Imperial invasion doctrine assumes that once orbital superiority is established and major population centers are threatened, planetary governments will surrender to prevent civilian casualties. Every successful Imperial conquest has followed this pattern. The display showed the typical progression: orbital bombardment demonstrations, demands for surrender, token resistance from military forces, then capitulation when the hopelessness of the situation became clear. Human response patterns suggest they will not follow this progression. Instead, they will likely respond to orbital bombardment by targeting our ground forces with every weapon at their disposal, including nuclear devices. They will not distinguish between military and civilian targets in their response, because they do not appear to consider survival under enemy rule as an acceptable outcome. The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. Counselor Prima 7's crystalline form pulsed with contemplative energy. Are you suggesting they would use nuclear weapons against an invasion force? I'm suggesting they would use nuclear weapons against their own territory if necessary to deny it to invaders, Thane replied grimly. Their historical patterns show they have deliberately destroyed their own cities, flooded their own lands, and poisoned their own food supplies to prevent enemy occupation. The ethereal harmony representative spoke in melodic tones that were translated as concern, but surely modern humans are more civilized than their historical ancestors? Thane had anticipated this objection as well. Their current military doctrines are even more extreme than their historical ones. They have developed theoretical strategies for nuclear guerrilla warfare and scorched earth defense. Their fiction is filled with scenarios where they fight alien invasions using any means necessary, including the destruction of their own infrastructure. Korax stood up, his exoskeleton gleaming under the chamber's lights. With respect to my colleague, this analysis is based on speculation and cultural interpretation. The Zephyrian Empire has conquered 43 worlds. We understand military psychology. No species chooses extinction over subjugation when faced with the reality of imperial power. Because no species has ever been in the position these humans are in, Thane countered. Every other species we've encountered achieved interstellar travel before developing world-ending weapons. They had escape routes, colony worlds, ways to preserve their civilization even if their homeworld fell. He gestured to the Earth display. Humans are trapped on a single world with enough weapons to destroy that world multiple times over. They have no colonies to retreat to, no way to preserve their species except by holding their ground. The debate continued for several hours, with representatives raising questions about human capabilities, imperial military superiority, and the precedent of interfering with established expansion operations. Throughout it all, Thane presented more evidence of human psychological patterns that suggested they would not respond to conquest attempts the way other species had. Finally, Counselor Prima 7 called for formal statements from the involved parties. The Zephyrian delegation maintained that their military assessment was sound and that cultural analysis was not grounds for canceling approved operations. Thane made his final appeal. Honored counselors, I am not asking you to prevent the Zephyrian Empire from expanding. I am warning you that this particular expansion will likely result in the complete destruction of a populated world and massive imperial casualties. The humans will not surrender. They will fight with every weapon they possess, and they possess weapons capable of making their entire world uninhabitable. When the vote was called, the result was close but decisive. 26 representatives voted to allow the operation to proceed, 18 voted to delay pending further study, and 3 abstained. The Zephyrian Empire's invasion plans would continue as scheduled. As the session concluded and representatives began filing out, Corax approached Thane with what might have been sympathy in his compound eyes. You've done your duty as you see it, the Zephyrian said. But, the Empire cannot show weakness by backing down from primitive worlds based on theoretical concerns. I understand the political necessities, Thane replied. I just hope I'm wrong about the practical consequences. But, as he returned to his quarters and reviewed the data one more time, Thane became more convinced that the galaxy was about to witness something unprecedented. The Zephyrian Empire was about to encounter a species that would rather die fighting than live in subjugation. In 48 hours, the invasion fleet would depart for Earth. Thane spent those hours composing detailed reports for the Council archives, documenting his predictions about human resistance patterns. If he was correct, future galactic civilizations would need to understand what had happened in the Sol system. The fleet that departed Station Prime was magnificent in its power and terrible in its purpose. 500 ships carrying enough firepower to sterilize a dozen worlds, all focused on conquering a single planet whose inhabitants had never left their own star system. As Thane watched the ships disappear into hyperspace, he couldn't shake the feeling that the Zephyrian Empire had just made the greatest military blunder in galactic history. The humans might be primitive by galactic standards, but they were about to teach the galaxy a lesson about the price of underestimating a cornered enemy with nothing left to lose. The Zephyrian invasion fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system with perfect precision, their ships materializing in a formation that had been refined through dozens of successful conquests. Fleet Admiral Corax stood on the command bridge of the Imperial flagship Domination, watching as his tactical displays populated with sensor data from the target system. Initial scans confirm intelligence reports, his tactical officer reported. Single inhabited world, third from the star. No evidence of FTL capability or orbital defense platforms. Multiple artificial satellites in planetary orbit, primitive chemical propulsion systems. Corax nodded with satisfaction. Everything appeared exactly as their scouts had reported. Earth hung in space like a blue jewel, blissfully unaware that its fate had been decided in chambers light years away. Begin standard approach protocol, Corax commanded. Signal groups Alpha through Delta to establish orbital perimeter. Groups Epsilon and Zeta maintain hyperspace-ready positions. The fleet moved with mechanical precision toward Earth, their ships cutting through the void with the confidence of an empire that had never known defeat. On worlds across the galaxy, similar fleets had approached similar planets, and the outcome had always been the same: submission or destruction. But, 3 days into their approach, the first signs appeared that this conquest might be different. Admiral, the communications officer announced, we're receiving multiple transmissions from the target world. They appear to be attempting contact. Already? Corax was surprised. Most primitive civilizations didn't detect Imperial fleets until they were much closer to the planet. Put the translations through. The bridge speakers filled with a cacophony of voices speaking in different languages, but all translated with remarkable consistency. Unknown vessels, please identify yourselves. This is Earth Defense Command. Please state your intentions. Corax exchanged glances with his staff officers. Earth Defense Command? Their intelligence had indicated no unified planetary government, certainly nothing that would call itself a defense command. Sir, the sensor officer's voice carried a note of confusion. I'm detecting massive energy signatures from the planet's surface. It appears they're powering up some kind of installations. The tactical display shifted to show Earth in greater detail. Across the planet's surface, bright energy signatures were appearing at thousands of locations. Military bases, missile silos, nuclear facilities, and installations that their scouts hadn't properly identified were coming online with startling coordination. They're mobilizing, Corax realized. Somehow they detected us from farther away than should be possible with their primitive sensor technology. What the Zephyrian fleet didn't know was that human astronomers had been tracking their approach since they first appeared at the system's edge. The same species that had spent decades searching for signs of extraterrestrial life had built a network of detection systems that could spot incoming spacecraft long before they became a direct threat. More importantly, humanity had spent the past 70 years preparing for exactly this scenario. Admiral, the tactical officer's voice was tense. I'm reading launch signatures from the planet. Multiple missiles inbound. Impossible, Corax snapped. We're still 3 million kilometers out. They don't have the technology to reach us at this range. But, the sensor displays told a different story. Dozens of missiles were accelerating toward the fleet at velocities that shouldn't have been possible for chemical propulsion systems. As the tactical computers analyzed the incoming projectiles, a disturbing picture emerged. Sir, those missiles appear to be nuclear-tipped, the weapons officer reported. But, they're not following ballistic trajectories. They're actively maneuvering. Corax stared at the display in disbelief. The human missiles were demonstrating technology that shouldn't exist in a pre-FTL civilization: advanced guidance systems, adaptive maneuvering capabilities, and yields that were larger than intelligence estimates had suggested possible. Defense batteries engage, Corax ordered. All ships, implement point defense protocols. The Imperial fleet's energy weapons began picking off the incoming missiles, but more kept launching from Earth's surface. Hundreds of them, then thousands, rising from locations across the planet in coordinated waves. Admiral, we're detecting massive energy buildups at multiple surface installations, the sensor officer reported. It appears they have some kind of directed energy weapons. As if summoned by his words, brilliant beams of coherent light began reaching out from Earth's surface. The beams were crude by Imperial standards, but they were powerful enough to damage ship hulls at extreme range. How is this possible? Corax demanded. Our intelligence indicated primitive technology levels. His communications officer had been monitoring human transmissions and provided a disturbing answer. Sir, they appear to have been preparing for invasion scenarios for decades. These weapons systems were specifically designed to engage spacecraft. The realization hit Corax like a physical blow. Humanity had been expecting this. They had prepared for this. Their entire military doctrine had been built around fighting an enemy with superior technology. Sir, the tactical officer's voice was urgent now. The missiles are getting through our point defenses. Their nuclear yields are much higher than estimated. The first nuclear detonation against Imperial shields sent shockwaves through the fleet. Then, the second. Then, the third. The humans were somehow coordinating thousands of simultaneous attacks from across their planet. Advance fleet groups, begin orbital bombardment, Corax ordered. Target their major population centers. Force them to surrender before this gets worse. But, as the Imperial ships moved closer to Earth, the defensive fire intensified. The humans had built their entire world into a fortress, with weapons systems hidden in locations the Imperial scouts had dismissed as civilian infrastructure. Admiral, we're detecting energy signatures from their lunar installations, the sensor officer reported. They have weapons on their satellite as well. On their moon? Corax couldn't keep the disbelief out of his voice. They put weapons on their moon? The tactical display showed energy weapons and missile systems coming online across the lunar surface. The humans had turned their entire local space into a killing ground. Sir, incoming transmission from the planet's surface, the communications officer announced. It's being broadcast on all frequencies. Put it through. A human voice filled the bridge, speaking in what their translators identified as the language called English. this is General Sarah Chen, Earth Defense Command. You have entered our star system with hostile intent and weapons active. You have one chance to withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Corax activated the communication system. I am Fleet Admiral Corax of the Zephyrian Empire. Your world has been selected for integration into the Empire. Surrender immediately or face complete destruction. The response came back without hesitation. Admiral Corax, this is our home. We will not surrender it to anyone, for any reason. If you want our world, you'll have to take it over our dead bodies. That can be arranged, Corax replied coldly. We're counting on it, came the human response. We've been preparing for you for 70 years. The transmission cut off, and the intensity of Earth's defensive fire doubled. Nuclear missiles reached out like angry hornets, while energy weapons carved through space with increasing accuracy. The humans were adapting their targeting algorithms in real time, learning how to hit Imperial ships more effectively. Status report, Corax demanded. 17 ships have taken damage, his tactical officer reported. 3 have lost main power. The humans are concentrating their fire on individual targets instead of spreading it across the fleet. It was a sophisticated tactic that indicated advanced military thinking. Instead of trying to damage many ships slightly, they were trying to destroy ships completely, reducing the fleet's overall capability. Sir, the communications officer's voice was strained, I'm monitoring human military communications. They're using some kind of quantum entanglement system for instantaneous coordination across their planet. The implications were staggering. The humans had achieved practical quantum communication without achieving faster-than-light travel. They were more advanced in some areas than Imperial intelligence had realized. Begin general bombardment, Corax ordered. Target everything. Show them the futility of resistance. The Imperial fleet unleashed its awesome firepower on Earth's surface, energy weapons and kinetic bombardment systems, turning entire cities into craters. But, for every installation they destroyed, 10 more revealed themselves. The humans had hidden weapons systems in places the Imperial forces had never thought to look. Admiral, the tactical officer's voice carried a note of fear that Corax had never heard before, they're launching something big. The sensor displays showed massive energy signatures rising from deep underground installations. These weren't missiles or conventional weapons. They were something else entirely. Sir, those appear to be nuclear-powered spacecraft, the sensor officer reported. Crude designs, but they're heavily armed and they're heading directly for us. Nuclear-powered spacecraft? Corax stared at the display. They don't have FTL technology. They don't need it, his tactical officer realized. They're building short-range combat ships powered by nuclear reactors. Essentially flying bombs with engines. The first wave of human combat ships reached the Imperial fleet and immediately began ramming attacks against the larger vessels. They weren't trying to fight a conventional space battle. They were turning themselves into guided missiles. They're insane, Corax whispered. More energy signatures appeared on sensors as Earth's surface revealed even more hidden installations. The humans had spent decades preparing for this moment, building weapons systems that their enemies wouldn't expect, hiding their true military capability behind a facade of primitive technology. Sir, urgent message from Group Delta, the communications officer announced. They report that human forces are attempting to board Imperial ships. Boarding actions? Corax's confusion deepened. How are primitive beings attempting boarding actions in space? The answer came from the tactical displays. Human combat ships were equipped with some kind of magnetic docking systems, allowing them to attach to Imperial hulls and cut their way inside. Admiral, his tactical officer's voice was urgent, I'm reading massive energy buildups from Earth's polar regions. Whatever they're preparing to launch, it's much larger than anything we've seen so far. As Corax watched in horror, enormous structures rose from beneath Earth's ice caps. They had been hidden there for decades, waiting for exactly this moment. The energy signatures they were generating dwarfed anything the Imperial fleet had encountered from a planetary surface. What are those? He demanded. The answer came from his science officer. Based on energy output, they appear to be massive directed energy weapons. Possibly planet-based particle accelerators adapted for space combat. Earth's final defensive systems came online, revealing the true scope of human preparation. They had turned their entire world into a weapon, hiding their most powerful systems in the most unlikely locations, waiting for invaders who thought they understood what they were facing. The battle for Earth was just beginning, and already it was unlike anything in the history of galactic conquest. The battle for Earth had been raging for 6 hours, and Fleet Admiral Corax was beginning to understand why Ambassador Thane had called the invasion suicidal. What should have been a simple demonstration of superior firepower had become a nightmare of attrition warfare against an enemy that refused to follow any known patterns of civilized behavior. Fleet status report, Corax demanded from his tactical officer, whose exoskeleton was now showing stress fractures from the sustained combat operations. 47 ships destroyed, 123 damaged, came the grim response. The humans are targeting our power cores with some kind of penetrating munitions. They seem to know exactly where to hit us. It was worse than that, though Corax was only beginning to realize it. The humans hadn't just prepared weapons systems for this day. They had studied Imperial ship designs from captured scout vessels, analyzed their construction methods, and identified their vulnerabilities. Every missile, every energy beam, every ramming attack was precisely targeted at the weakest points of Imperial armor and shielding. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from the human government." "Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was different from the military commander who had spoken earlier. This one was older, wearier, but filled with an iron determination that sent chills through the Zephyrian command staff. "This is President Harrison, speaking for the United Earth government. Admiral Corax, you've been fighting us for 6 hours. How do you think this is going for you?" Corax's mandibles clicked in irritation. "Your losses are far greater than ours. We have destroyed dozens of your cities. And we've destroyed 47 of your ships," came the calm reply. "Ships that took years to build and can't be replaced. Cities can be rebuilt. Ships and trained crews cannot." The human was correct, though Corax would never admit it. Each Imperial vessel represented decades of construction and training. The humans were trading infrastructure for irreplaceable military assets, and they seemed perfectly willing to make that trade. Moreover, President Harrison continued, "We're just getting started. You've seen our conventional defenses. Would you like to see what we built specifically for visitors like you?" Before Corax could respond, the sensor displays erupted with new contacts. From hidden installations across Earth's surface, new types of weapons were emerging. These weren't the crude nuclear missiles and energy weapons they had been facing. These were systems that shouldn't have existed on a pre-FTL world. "Sir," the science officer's voice was filled with disbelief, "I'm reading gravitational distortions from the planet's surface. They appear to have some kind of gravity manipulation technology." "Impossible," Corax snapped. "Gravity control requires technology levels far beyond what they should possess." But the tactical displays told a different story. Invisible fingers of twisted spacetime reached out from Earth, grabbing Imperial ships and crushing them like insects. The humans had somehow developed localized gravity manipulation without achieving faster-than-light travel. How? Corax demanded. His science officer consulted the sensor data frantically. "It appears they've built massive particle accelerators underground, using them to create controlled singularities. They're essentially weaponizing black holes." The scope of human preparation was staggering. They had developed technologies that most species didn't achieve until after they had established interstellar civilizations. But they had done it all while trapped on a single world, driven by the certain knowledge that someday, someone would come for them. "Admiral," the tactical officer's voice was urgent, "the humans are launching another wave of combat ships, but these are different. Much larger." The new ships rising from Earth's surface were indeed different. Where the earlier vessels had been crude nuclear-powered rams, these were sophisticated fighting machines that bristled with weapons systems. They moved with the precision of advanced artificial intelligence guidance systems. "Sir, those ships appear to be completely automated," the sensor officer reported. "No life signs aboard any of them." "Automated warships?" Corax stared at the tactical displays. They built automated warships? It was a logical step, he realized. A species trapped on one world with limited population would naturally develop unmanned fighting systems to maximize their defensive capability. But the sophistication of these new ships was remarkable. They're coordinating their attacks through quantum entanglement communication, the communications officer reported. Perfect real-time coordination across their entire fleet. The automated ships swarmed the Imperial fleet like angry wasps, their weapons systems adapting in real time to Imperial countermeasures. They learned from each exchange, becoming more effective with every passing minute. "Sir," the tactical officer's voice carried a new note of fear, "I'm detecting massive energy buildups from Earth's moon. They're powering up something enormous." The lunar installations that had been providing supporting fire were now revealing their true purpose. Hidden beneath the moon's surface was a weapon system of unprecedented scale. Energy output is comparable to a small star, the science officer reported. Whatever they built there, it's designed for system-wide destruction. The implication was clear: the humans were prepared to sterilize their own star system rather than allow it to be conquered. They had turned their moon into a massive bomb capable of destroying everything within the orbit of Mars. "This is insane," Korax whispered. "They would destroy their own world rather than surrender it?" "Sir, incoming message from the human president," the communications officer announced. Admiral Korax, President Harrison's voice was calm despite the devastation being unleashed around his world. "We need to discuss terms." "Terms?" Korax seized on what seemed like the first reasonable statement he had heard from the humans. "You're prepared to surrender?" "No," came the immediate reply. "We're prepared to negotiate your withdrawal from our system." The audacity was breathtaking. The humans, fighting from a single world against an Imperial fleet, were suggesting that the Empire should retreat. "You are in no position to negotiate anything," Korax replied angrily. "Admiral," President Harrison's voice carried a note of sadness, "in the past 6 hours, we've destroyed nearly 10% of your fleet. Our automated systems are learning your tactics faster than you can adapt to ours. Our lunar installation is charging a weapon that can sterilize this entire star system. And we've just begun to deploy our real defensive systems." "Real defensive systems?" Korax couldn't keep the disbelief out of his voice. "What we've seen so far were just preparations. Admiral, everything you've encountered so far was built with conventional technology that we've had for decades. Would you like to see what we've developed specifically for this day?" The sensor displays erupted with new contacts as systems across Earth revealed themselves. These weren't hidden weapons or disguised installations. These were obviously military structures that had been built with no other purpose than to destroy invading spacecraft. "Mass driver installations," the tactical officer reported. "Hundreds of them. They're launching projectiles at significant fractions of light speed." "Antimatter production facilities," the science officer added. "They're manufacturing antimatter warheads in real time." "Quantum field manipulators," the sensor officer contributed. "They're creating localized spacetime distortions around our ships." The humans had spent 70 years developing every possible method of destroying spacecraft. They had approached the problem from every conceivable angle, developing redundant systems for redundant systems. "Sir," the communications officer's voice was strained, "I'm monitoring communications between Earth and their outer system installations. They have hidden bases throughout their star system." The tactical displays updated to show the true scope of human preparation. Automated defense installations throughout the Sol system, hidden weapon platforms in the asteroid belt, massive energy collectors around their sun itself. The humans hadn't just fortified their homeworld. They had turned their entire star system into a trap. "How long have they been preparing for this?" Korax asked weakly. According to their own communications, the communications officer replied, after monitoring human transmissions, they began serious preparation immediately after developing nuclear weapons. 75 years of continuous military development focused entirely on defending against technological superior invaders. "Admiral," President Harrison's voice returned to the speakers, "we've shown you a fraction of our capabilities. We can continue this demonstration until your fleet is completely destroyed, or you can acknowledge that conquering Earth will cost you more than you can afford." Korax studied his tactical displays. The Imperial fleet was indeed being systematically destroyed by weapons that shouldn't have existed on a pre-FTL world. The humans had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history, they had made their world genuinely unconquerable. "What are your terms?" he asked finally. "Simple," came the reply. "Withdraw your fleet beyond the edge of our star system and don't come back. In exchange, we won't demonstrate our long-range capabilities." Long-range capabilities? Admiral, did you really think a species that built this level of defensive systems wouldn't also develop offensive ones? We may be trapped in one star system, but our reach extends considerably beyond it. The threat was clear. Humanity was offering the Empire a chance to retreat with some of its fleet intact. The alternative was complete destruction followed by possible retaliation against Imperial worlds. "I need to consult with Imperial Command," Korak said. "You have 30 minutes, President Harrison replied. "After that, we begin demonstrating our more exotic defensive systems. I should mention that some of them affect entire star systems." The transmission ended, leaving Korax alone with the terrible realization that Ambassador Thane had been completely correct. Humanity wasn't just another primitive species to be conquered. They were something new, a civilization that had developed the capacity to make conquest impossible, even for technologically superior enemies. The price of taking Earth wouldn't be measured in ships or lives. It would be measured in the potential destruction of both civilizations. And that, Korax realized, was exactly what the humans had intended from the moment they first looked up at the stars and realized they were not alone. 3 days after the failed invasion of Earth, Ambassador Thane Vex 9 stood once again before the emergency session of the Galactic Council. The atmosphere in the Great Amphitheater was drastically different from the previous meeting. Where before there had been skepticism and routine bureaucratic process, now there was barely controlled panic. The holographic displays surrounding the chamber showed the devastating aftermath of the Sol System engagement. Of the 500 ships that had departed Station Prime with such confidence, only 237 had returned. The Zephyrian Empire had suffered its worst military defeat in over 3 centuries. "Honored counselors," Thane began, his voice carrying no satisfaction at being proven correct, "we are gathered to discuss the implications of what has occurred in the Sol System. The species known as humans has demonstrated capabilities that fundamentally challenge our understanding of galactic military doctrine." Counselor Prima 7 of the Silicon Collective pulsed with urgent energy patterns. "Ambassador Thane, please provide your analysis of the engagement." "The humans did exactly what I predicted they would do," Thane replied, activating the tactical displays. "They refused to surrender despite overwhelming odds, they used every weapon at their disposal regardless of the cost to themselves, and they made conquest so expensive that retreat became the only rational option. The data streams showed the progression of the battle, humanity's hidden defensive systems, their adaptive tactics, their willingness to sacrifice infrastructure for strategic advantage. But, more disturbing were the projections of what would have happened if the engagement had continued. The humans were prepared to destroy their own star system rather than allow it to be conquered," Thane continued. "They had constructed weapons capable of sterilizing everything within several billion kilometers of their sun. They were not bluffing." Counselor Reefsinger of the Aquatic Dominion raised a tentacle in what the translators interpreted as distress. "Are you saying they would have committed planetary suicide?" "I'm saying they would have committed galactic homicide," Thane corrected. The energy readings from their lunar installation indicated they had built a weapon capable of creating a cascade reaction in their star. They could have triggered a supernova. The chamber fell silent as the implications registered. A species that would destroy their own star to prevent conquest wasn't just dangerous to potential invaders. They were dangerous to every inhabited system within light years of their position. Fleet Admiral Korax, attending the session via emergency transmission from the damaged Imperial flagship, provided his military assessment. "The humans possess technological capabilities that our intelligence completely failed to detect. They have gravity manipulation, antimatter production, and what appears to be limited time-space distortion technology. How is this possible?" Speaker Windsong of the Avian Collective chirped urgently. "No species achieves such advanced physics without first developing interstellar travel." Thane had spent the past 3 days analyzing captured human transmissions and had arrived at a disturbing conclusion. Because they had something no other species in our recorded history has had, 75 years of preparation time with absolute certainty that invasion was inevitable. He brought up comparative development charts showing how different species had allocated resources during their pre-FTL periods. Most civilizations focused on exploration, colonization, and peaceful expansion. Humanity had focused entirely on preparing for war. They knew someone would eventually come for them, Thane explained. Their earliest detection of our existence came through radio astronomy. They have been listening to our communications for decades, learning our languages, studying our military doctrine, and preparing countermeasures. The revelation sent ripples of alarm through the assembly. Humanity hadn't just been preparing for generic alien invasion. They had been preparing specifically for the Galactic Council's member species. Moreover, Thane continued, their preparation wasn't limited to defensive systems. The humans have developed offensive capabilities that extend far beyond their star system. New data appeared on the displays, showing energy signatures detected throughout the local galactic region during the Earth engagement. The humans had revealed the existence of automated probes, hidden installations, and long-range weapons systems scattered across dozens of nearby star systems. They've been infiltrating local space for decades, Admiral Corax reported grimly. We found evidence of human monitoring stations in 17 systems. They've been watching us while we thought we were watching them. The strategic implications were staggering. Humanity had essentially turned the local galactic region into an extension of their defensive perimeter. Any species attempting to invade Earth would find themselves fighting not just on a single world, but across multiple star systems simultaneously. What are you suggesting? Counselor Stonemind of the Mineral Assembly rumbled with deep concern. I'm suggesting that humanity represents an entirely new category of galactic civilization, Thane replied. They are not a pre-FTL species awaiting conquest. They are a post-conquest species that has developed the capability to make conquest impossible. He highlighted the key elements of human strategy, distributed defensive systems, adaptive technology, automated warfare, and, most importantly, the psychological willingness to choose mutual destruction over defeat. Every previous conquest has succeeded because the target civilization could envision survival under imperial rule, Thane explained. Humans appear to be psychologically incapable of accepting that outcome. They would rather cease to exist than exist under foreign control. The debate that followed was unlike anything in the Council's history. Representatives struggled to understand how to deal with a species that had essentially made itself unconquerable through sheer determination and technological innovation. What does this mean for imperial expansion policy? Counselor Prima 7 asked. Admiral Corax provided the military perspective. It means we cannot conquer Earth. The cost would exceed the destruction of our entire fleet, and there's no guarantee of success even then. The humans can literally destroy their star to prevent our victory. But they haven't attacked our worlds, pointed out the Ethereal Harmony representative. They seem content to remain in their own system. This was the crucial point, Thane realized. Humanity had developed overwhelming defensive capabilities, but they appeared to have no interest in galactic conquest themselves. According to their own communications, Thane reported, humans have no desire for galactic expansion. They want to be left alone. Their entire military doctrine is focused on defense, not conquest. Then, what do they want from us? Speaker Winsong asked. The answer came from an unexpected source, a direct transmission from Earth itself. President Harrison's voice filled the chamber through the communication systems. Honored counselors of the Galactic Council, the human leader began, we wish to propose a new category of diplomatic status, armed neutrality. The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs. Direct communication with the Council was unprecedented for a non-member species. We have no desire for conquest or expansion beyond our star system, President Harrison continued. We ask only to be left alone to develop as we see fit. In exchange, we offer non-interference with galactic affairs and defensive technology sharing for species facing existential threats. Defensive technology sharing? Counselor Prima 7 pulsed with interest. We have developed highly effective methods for defending against technologically superior invaders, came the reply. We are willing to share these technologies with species facing extinction-level threats, in exchange for formal recognition of our independence. Thane realized the brilliance of the human proposal. They were offering to teach other species how to defend themselves against exactly the kind of conquest that the Empire typically carried out. It was a direct challenge to the entire structure of galactic power. What guarantees do you offer that these technologies won't be used offensively? Admiral Corax asked suspiciously. The same guarantee you offered us, President Harrison replied coolly. None. The difference is that our technologies are specifically designed for defensive operations. They're most effective when protecting a homeworld from invasion. The session continued for hours as representatives debated the implications of humanity's proposal. Eventually, a formal vote was called on whether to recognize human independence and accept their offer of defensive technology sharing. The result was decisive: 38 representatives voted to accept, 7 voted to reject, and 2 abstained. For the first time in galactic history, a pre-FTL civilization had negotiated their independence through superior military capability. As the session concluded, Thane found himself approached by Admiral Corax. The Zephyrian's exoskeleton showed evidence of recent medical treatment from the battle damage his ship had sustained. You were correct about everything, Corax admitted. The humans are unlike any species we've ever encountered. They're what happens when a species knows invasion is inevitable and has time to prepare, Thane replied. They couldn't leave their star system, so they made their star system unconquerable. Do you think other species will adopt their model? Corax asked. Thane considered the question carefully. I think humanity just changed the fundamental rules of galactic expansion. No empire can afford to ignore the possibility that their next target might have spent decades preparing defenses specifically designed to counter their tactics. 6 months later, the first species requested human defensive technology assistance when faced with aggressive expansion from a rival civilization. Within a year, 17 species had implemented human-designed defensive systems. The age of easy galactic conquest was over. Humanity had achieved something unprecedented. They had used their isolation as an advantage, their limitations as strengths, and their determination as an unstoppable weapon. They had taught the galaxy that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one with nothing left to lose and 75 years to prepare for your arrival. Ambassador Thane Vex 9 was awarded the Council's highest honor for diplomatic service, but he knew the real victors were the humans who had looked at an impossible situation and found a way to make it work for them. They had turned their small blue world into the most dangerous place in the galaxy to attack, and, in doing so, they had made it the safest place in the galaxy to live. The galaxy had learned an important lesson: underestimate humans at your own peril. They might be trapped on one world, but they had made that world into a fortress that could hold back the stars themselves.